Okay guys, today let's talk a little bit about video games and whether or not we think they're art. First, Nigel, what do you think about video games? Are they art or are they not?
Well, I believe they are art because it's more of like a mishmash of different things coming together. Because you can't have like movies are just video basically, and then like photographs are just images, and then a book is just writing like a narrative in the story. And a video game is kind of like almost all those put together. So it is art because it's a mishmash of all these different mediums.
Delilah?
Well, I think there's a big difference between art and video games because games, you can win. You don't really win art with games. There's rules, an objective, even an outcome. So I think if there is perhaps like a lack of those elements, then a game can become art. But then you have to ask yourself, is it still a game at that point, or is it just a piece of art?
Woohoo! Who knows? Are there any games you feel like overlap both of those boundaries though? Is there any game in particular you might say, oh, like that could be art. I could consider that art possibly?
Oh, definitely. There's tons of games out there that you're just, like, why did you make this? This doesn't make sense. Like Flower. Have you guys heard of Flower? You play as gusts of wind and you're making musical notes with the flowers that you play. But then there's also other games that you could say are applied design, like Portal and Portal 2, which do have rules and objectives and outcomes, but are still, I would consider that art.
Are there any games that just aren't art to you guys though?
GTA.
Call of
Why?
Duty.
I feel like Sam would have a problem like with that particular decision, so can you explain to me why you wouldn't feel that that's art at all?
Well, besides the fact that I don't like the games, I think even though it is story-oriented, it's still about the actions and steps of the game itself rather than the overall essence of it. And the fact that you can kill hookers, I don't consider that.
So things like that make something less able to be art in your opinion, or just generally the whole game doesn't feel like art to you?
I think the whole game could be art, but there's just certain aspects of it that just feel it's not strong enough to be it. If it was maybe perhaps written better, or I mean the graphics are really great. They always get better every game. So I'm not saying the graphics are bad, so it's ugly and it can't be art. But there's just certain aspects of it where it just could be stronger, and then perhaps it could go out in the art field.
Nigel, would you agree or disagree with that opinion of what
so
makes a game art or not?
Well, some games like are considered art, like more artsy, like high class because of the way they're written and because they have good stories, and some ones like don't have good stories but have better graphics than the ones that have good stories. It's just really a balance of the two. If you want like something to be a great art, like why do people think like he was a great artist, or why do people think that like, oh, he's like good at writing a book or something? Like it's basically dependent on like what people really think of it. Because a lot of people like GTA 5, they might consider it art because a lot of people like it. A lot of people might not like it because like it's violent and it's like just random acts of violence around the city, just doing whatever you want. But then there's other ones that I think are art based on like what is in the game, specifically if it has a good story, if like more of it was drawn. There's some games that are completely hand drawn by people and then animated later. Like The Walking Dead, most of that is drawn, and then some of it is also CGI. So there's aspects of that are also in like art, they're like drawn, like they're painting that are drawn, and there's stuff in video games that are also drawn. So you gotta just look at, see what you consider to be art, and see if it's in a video game. If it's in a video game, you consider art outside of a video game, then it's in a, if it's in a video game, then it's art to you.
Do you think that games where you create art would be considered art in themselves? Like Minecraft. I made a giant Hugh Laurie in Minecraft once. Is that art or is it not? I'm just saying, I made some pretty cool stuff in Minecraft, so.
Is the video game art itself, or is the content you're creating art?
Is it going to be considered art if you're creating art with it? Is it something that creates other art? Is that art?
I don't know. I would consider it a sandbox game. So are all sandbox games art? Because, that's hard. I didn't think about that.
Sorry, I'm throwing out the hard questions today, really.
That's a good question. Like, there's other games, I can't remember the name of it exactly, where it's like, It's like this little doodle game where you can run around with this character and you can draw stuff for him. You can draw like him to ride dinosaurs, and you draw this dinosaur and he gets to ride on this dinosaur and he gets to destroy stuff. And it's just that whatever you can think of and you can draw it in the game has it. It's like, oh, that's all pre-rendered stuff and they've drawn it, but it's just, is that art because it's already in the game, or is it because you're drawing it that it's all of a sudden art? Like,
well, there was actually a recent art installation online where everyone can they can draw 5 seconds of animation, and they can add on to it, add on to other people's, and it really just becomes like a tree of animation, and you can see all the branches that it went to. That's considered art, so I don't see why not like a Sandbox can do that, because it's giving you the same kind of power to do that, to create something, so yeah, I don't see why not.
Do you think intention has anything to do with it too? Because if somebody intends a game to be beautiful and considers it in themselves art, does that make it art? I don't think that Minecraft was created to be art, but people use it to make art. So does that have anything to do with it in your mind?
oh yeah, like Legos. Legos are now considered art. I went to New York and there was a museum with Lego statues in it that they consider artwork because it's in a museum. And it's the same thing with Minecraft. I could see later, like 10, 15 years down the road, that we go and visit a museum where there's video screens of like virtual art. Like it's like 3D and junk. That is entirely possible. I'm not even sure if they have that now. They probably even do. Like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
In MoMA, they had a video game installation piece where they had old games like Tetris, and they also had SimCity 2000 on there. And these pieces at the time weren't considered art, and they probably weren't created to be art, just a game for people to play, make money off of. But people thought it was art. They were like, oh, aesthetically, this is art. So I think as long as the audience thinks it's art, you can call it art.
Yeah, for me, like, I consider art something that has like an effect on somebody. You can't just create a pretty drawing. It has to have some sort of effect on people around it. So when I play a video game that is emotional for me, or like Kingdom Hearts really touched my soul in wrong ways sometimes, like, would you consider that art or not? Because for me, the story, if it really has a huge effect on you, changes the way you think about the world around you, I consider that art. So would you guys consider that art, or maybe not as much?
I do consider stories art because there are certain things like, I was watching actually today, there was an IGN podcast. There was a guy that literally said that like linear narrative stories in video games don't belong. And that just made me angry because I played like The Last of Us and BioShock, where they had very interesting, intricate stories that made you feel and made you care about different characters. And there's RPGs that do the same thing, where there's different characters. You like learn to care about each of these people, and you don't want them to die along the way. You want them to make it through with you. And he's saying like, no, they don't matter, because like they were defending like all these other bad games that were just like shoot 'em ups, like Call of Duty and Destiny. They're like, oh, stories aren't necessary. What are you talking about? You don't need it. I'm like, no, you need it. Like, it's like the backbone. That's why, like, to me, video games are a little bit above like movies and books because of the interactivity. Like, you can't interact with a book. You can like read a book, but you can't like edit what's going on in the book. And like, you can edit what's going on in a video game, but you can't edit what's going on in a movie. You just watch a movie. You just read a book. You can't interact with either.
A movie's not going to stop you from advancing in the movie when you fail to like understand what's happening or something.
No, you can't get your head cut off in a movie. No,
I think that's a unique thing about video games in particular. It's the one art form that will stop you and say, nah. Like, no, you can't advance yet. You have to beat this boss. Sorry about it.
Yeah, it's the only one. It also gives you choices. Like, you make your own path, like branching storylines. Like, do you want to kill this person, or do you want to save this person? This guy might backstab you later, but you don't know. Like, this is like the cool interactive aspect of video games that makes it a little bit higher up on the aspect of the movies and books.
It's weird that they said that too, because usually those games are the ones that do best, or the ones that get like the best reviews. And he's saying that it doesn't belong.
It doesn't belong. Yeah, that made me angry. He was basically saying like that, like this like famous person once said that games can't be art, like what we're talking about now. Games can't be art, but he's like, no, I think he meant that games can't have good stories because they are games, because you're supposed to just have fun with games. And like he's completely wrong, because what the basis of like everything is, what books became popular because they started playing narratives and because they started putting stories in, because people could relate to what was being written instead of just text and like mathematical equations and everything that was being written, like holy text. Like basically like it's a narrative, and people start getting interested because they're like, oh, there's a narrative, I can follow on what's going on in this.
And I know that when narrative stories began being published, people thought that, oh, these are for children. And here we are today where we are forced to read these books in high school because you learn something from it, I guess. But I think we're at the point where video games are changing to the point where they're not just games, they're becoming a mix of everything. And we might see the next Great Gatsby in a game. You just have to look for it. It's not going to be exactly like a movie, it's not going to be exactly like a book. So you have to keep on playing games to find that miracle of the story, I guess.
So yeah, I think that the nature of video games has changed a lot, and even if we disagree about the entirety of video games being an art form and being art, we can probably agree that a lot of aspects of what we use in video games, the story, the work that goes into like all these beautiful surroundings and everything, the gameplay and everything, those are art, even if the video games themselves aren't. It's kind of up to your discretion and how you define art. So yeah.
Go team.
Go team. Oh God.